Wow. Okay.
Ballers, welcome back to this week's best and worst three champions for mid lane. We're in week 5 of season 14, and we've got a new leader of the pack with Brand in the mid lane. Very interesting setup here. Brand was, in my opinion, always strong with Liandry's Torment, but it looks like at a 53% win rate, you're going to want to use Arcane Comet as your main rune, follow that up with some Inspiration, Tree, and Summoner spells of Flash and Ghost. So I guess the Ghost here really just helps him kite out some enemies, dodge some sticky situations in the mid lanes with ganks, but I think this spell here is probably still matchup dependent. So if you're playing against something where maybe you want a barrier or a teleport, for example, into some type of a burst artillery mage, definitely still consider that, but based on the 4,000 matches here, Ghost and Flash are your top summoner spells. Toughest matchups, he doesn't really have any. There's one that's any situation, mid lane into any comp, into any matchup, and still do pretty good. Skill path, still the normal skill path with Brand, maxing out the W, E, and then Q. And starting items, pretty standard, and the core items, again, I think this third one is the one that'll change kind of week to week, but Liandry's Torment Rush is just too good on Brand right now. Obviously the Sorc Shoes, and then it's saying Rylai's Crystalline Scepter is your highest performing third item to round out your core set, and then your 4th, 5th, and 6th options I think will be a little bit game dependent, but again, look pretty standard here in terms of mage items. Naafiri has made our top 3 again for the second week in a row here, so Naafiri is still super strong, basically the exact same rune setup that we had last week of the First Strike and the Inspiration. Secondary Tree running Domination. I think this can be a little bit game dependent. Again, if you wanted to have some flexibility and play around with things, sometimes instead of Treasure Hunter, I use Ultimate Hunter just to spam that ultimate as much as possible, and if you're going to be wanting to maybe use a attack speed force instead of offensive here, that could help you with wave clearing as well, but I don't think it really matters past the first few levels, to be honest, so that's a little bit more personal preference. Summoner spells, Flash and Teleport, again, depending on the matchup. If you're into a Vlad, for example, and you want to stop some of his healing, maybe you want to run Ignite here, so a little bit of skill expression there when you lock in Naafiri at the start of the lobby phase, if you want to try and change your summoner spells based on the matchup. She does have a few more tougher matchups than Brand. There's a few more here in the light red, but I don't think anything that would just be a hard stomp that you couldn't still outplay with some skill. Malphite, I would say, is probably matchups would be pretty tough for Naafiri because you're not very tanky yourself, and you definitely won't have the damage to kill a tank Malphite who's stacking armor. So consider banning out Malphite. I don't think they'll piloting Aurelia to the point where they're going to beat you with your kit. So those would be some of your tougher matchups, if anything. And then skill path, still maxing out the Q first, then E, then W, and the items like we talked about, same core items as last week, where we're going to be rushing the Profane Hydra, the Ionian Boots to the City for more cooldown reduction, and then the opportunity item for some of that move speed kind of after killing champions, and then just in general with the 5% that it adds. And still, in my opinion, but maybe games right now are going past 30 minutes, and she has the opportunity to level up and get to her power spikes in terms of the levels very, very easily. So the little bit of a change from last week that we have now is the leading rune set is actually running Press the Attack as opposed to the Fleet Footwork. I've also seen Kayle with high win rates at Lethal Tempo, so it looks like basically there's a few options in the Precision Tree that you can run as your major rune, but right now, like we talked about, the Press the Attack is the highest at a 52% plus win rate. Tough matchups. She's got a few kind of light red tough matchups: Twisted Fate, Annie, Gragas, Cass, Anivia. But again, I don't see any of these matchups as being something you just can't turtle early lane phase. Play very safe and scale with them. All of these champions are more scaling type champions that really come online at level 6. Cass, not so much. If she lands an E and a couple Qs on you early lane phase, she can chunk you pretty hard. But most of these rely on a level 6 power spike. So your power spike's a little bit later than theirs, which is probably why these are all going to be tougher matchups for you, and they have some of that burst and range advantage over you early on. Skill path, still make sure you max out that Q. That's going to be your best bet in terms of highest win rate. And then the core items have changed a little bit as well. Now we have Boots of Swiftness as your major rush item, and then following that up with Nashor's Tooth. So just making sure that you have some extra kiteability and move speed while you ramp up in terms of levels, and then buying some of those other core items later into the first 20 minutes of the game with Nashor's Tooth and Rabadon's Death Cap. And then we'll fly through our worst three here pretty quickly here because they're very similar to last week. LeBlanc mid, still no runes, no items that are really pushing her up in the win rate. She's still at a pretty bad 46% with a lot of tough matchups that are very popular right now in the mid lane. So just a really bad choice if you're playing ranked and you want to climb to play this champion. Cass, Mal's, Naafiri, Vex, Diana, Twisted Fate, Kassadin, Pantheon, Lathan. Like all of these champions are pretty popular right now in the meta, and they all are going to stomp you. So just avoid playing LeBlanc right now. Skill priority, you know, pretty standard stuff, but again, there's nothing here that's going to make you pop up above a 50% win rate unless you're an absolute one-trick god on this champion. And the core items, pretty standard here. It doesn't look like there's been anything different that's changed for LeBlanc. Ezreal is another one of our worst performing three champions for this week, 44% win rate. So, I mean, anytime somebody's below 45%, that's just like a clear sign, do not play this champion right now. Riot should be looking into this to try and make this champion more playable. Ezreal had some buffs, but it's not enough. I mean, again, there's no build here that's pushing him consistently above a 50% win rate. Doesn't matter what you do or what you build on this champion, you're just going to be playing a suboptimal matchup every time. Tons of counter matchups that just hard stomp you, like 35% win rate against some of these champions. So just absolutely avoid Ezreal right now. He's just not in a good spot for you to be played. And then our last champion here is Smolder, the new champion. She's rocking a surprisingly low 41% win rate. She's got a few different items and rune pages that people are trying to see if it can have some success with her. But realistically, it doesn't look like anything's working here. So this could be another Hwei situation where maybe she's strong in the right hands and, you know, it's just a bunch of new players who don't understand her kit yet, so her win rate's really bad. There is a bunch of matches on her in mid lane, 47,000 matches. So that leads me to believe right now, unless you are one of those one tricks, maybe just avoid playing her until the optimal setup comes out and you can just copy it and have better success. But right now, just stay away from Smolder. Nothing seems to be working. And if we actually look across Smolder's top win rate as well, 43%, so really bad there, over 22,000 matches. Jungle, she doesn't have a bunch of matches, but 22% win rate. And then if we look at her most popular position actually in the bot lane of 400,000+ matches, she's still rocking a 44% win rate. So just something to stay away, quick play or normal draft modes. Okay guys, that's going to do it for this week, so I'll catch you next week for our next top 3 best and worst champions.